Welcome back, everybody. It's a Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast on Fantasy Pros. I'm your host, Scott Bogman. Follow me on the Twitter at Bogman Sports. I'm joined, as always, by my friendo, Pat Fitzmaurice at Fitz_FF on the Twitter machine. Apparently, Wormley needs a vacation. He's earned it. He's worked a lot or whatever he says. I don't know what it is. But no, Wormley with us today. I'm not sure when he's back. But he'll be back. We didn't fire him. He'll be back sometime soon. But today on the show, Fitzy and I are going to discuss some ADP risers and fallers from February to May. And Fitz, I was a little surprised to see how many of these guys have moved significantly.
Yeah, it's interesting, Boggs. And we did leave out rookies because inevitably the rookie, their startup ADPs were going to change dramatically based on landing spots. So this probably would have been dominated by rookies if we had included them. Should mention that we got this data from our friends at Dynasty League Football, Ryan McDowell and company, great guys, and they probably have the best ADP data for dynasty leagues, I think, across the industry. They base it on probably more dynasty leagues than anyone else who tracks dynasty ADP data. So we appreciate their help with this. And it's our vacation, Boggs. We get a vacation from Worm. So, I mean, it's like we're the ones on vacation here.
Yeah, that's right. We're all celebrating right now. And these ADP numbers are for Superflex leagues, correct? Just to make sure we're getting the right info. So
we'll give you the positional ADP, and we will mention the overall ADP too. And the overall comes from Superflex startups.
And we got 20 names to go through. We're going to give you some really deep stashes at the very end of the show here as well. A couple names that I know Fitz likes, a couple names that I like as well. So let's get into it. Let's start. And the very first guy that we have here is quarterback Kyler Murray, going from QB 14. These are all risers to start, 10 risers. QB 14 to QB 9. And in the overall, he went from 19 to 12.3. So a lot of moving up for Kyler Murray. I think this is the addition of Marvin Harrison because that's all that really changed, right, Fitz? I mean, it was Marvin Harrison. Obviously, we got some more quarterbacks, so it's a little surprising to see a quarterback rise, but he's behind at least Caleb Williams still. So I think this is mainly due to the fact that they got an alpha wide receiver after losing Marquise Brown, and we all saw what Trey McBride was doing, and maybe possibly a little bit people paying more attention right now. So what do you think contributed to Kyler Murray's ascension here?
I do agree that the Marvin Harrison addition was probably the big driver, Boggs. I wonder if anyone still had some sort of trepidation about whether Murray was going to be with the Cardinals long term, because we know a year ago when it looked like the Cardinals were going into full-on tank mode, trading their first-round pick to the Texans to accrue future first-round picks, that maybe people thought it might be heralding an eventual reset at quarterback for the Cardinals, that they might be in the quarterback market in 2024. But I think we've known since February that probably was not going to be the case. So I'm kind of surprised by the jump. It's a jump from 19th overall in startups to 12.3. So, people are holding Kyler in pretty high esteem for him to be going at the turn in Superflex startups now.
Let's talk about Baker Mayfield moving up more in the overall. He moved up in QBs from 25 to 22. 3 spots isn't a significant jump, but 69 to 59 in the overall. I have him closer to QB 27, so I'm still a little bit lower on Baker, but my guess for the rise on Baker Mayfield would be he re-signed with Tampa, and they re-signed Mike Evans. So if we're running back what we saw last year, it was a pretty good year for Baker. He's still going to be limited in terms of upside in years because he is getting a little bit further into his career here. But I don't know. Baker is still a pretty good asset to have, I think, in a super flex.
He is, Boggs, but I do wonder about how he's going to fare this year without Dave Canales, noted quarterback whisperer who has moved on to be the head coach at Carolina. And, whether he coaxed such a good season out of Mayfield last year. And I, as a Packers fan, I had to watch Baker Mayfield come into Lambeau Field and be the first visiting quarterback ever to put up a perfect passer rating in a single game at Lambeau. So yeah, he was pretty terrific last year. I don't know about this though. Like, to me, late 5th round in a startup seems pretty aggressive for him.
Yeah, and I think that is because you get down to the people that aren't rostering quarterbacks fast enough, right? And when you get into these real drafts now, you have to have these QBs. Nobody's slipping through the cracks. We know where most of these guys are going to be, what their role is. So I think it's just we have the established guys, and it's probably maybe a little bit of a panicky move down at the end here. Let's talk some running backs. Josh Jacobs only moved up one spot positionally from RB14 to RB13, but he rose 10 spots in the overall, 78.8 to 68.5. I do have him as a low end RB1. His ECR is 15 in terms of dynasty for all of the rankers at Fantasy Pros. I think this rise is because, yes, they added Marshawn Lloyd, but this is a team that you think runs a lot. They didn't run as much as they have in the past last season. And I don't really know if I agree with this rise. So I don't know, Fitz. This is a fine spot for Josh Jacobs. But what do you think about your new Green Bay Packers lead running back raising in ADP here a little bit?
Like you, Boggs, I think I have reservations about this increase, this improvement in his ADP. I get it. I think people are bullish on the improved offensive ecosystem for Josh Jacobs. And undeniably, it's a step up, I think, going from the Raiders to the Packers in this promising young offense Green Bay has. But we talked about this on a redraft show we were just doing together. Matt LaFleur has not been he has not been a monogamous one running back type of guy throughout his career. And we saw AJ Dillon consistently get around 10 carries a game, even when Aaron Jones was healthy, even though Aaron Jones is like miles better than AJ Dillon. And I was talking about it when Matt LaFleur was the offensive coordinator and play caller for the Tennessee Titans in 2018. He had a split backfield with Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis. Derrick Henry only had 60 more carries than Dion Lewis that season. So anyone expecting Josh Jacobs to get 20 to 25 carries a game in Green Bay might want to go back and look at the Matt LaFleur track record on that, because Matt LaFleur has not been a workhorse running back type of guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this window that we have Jacobs, I think he's probably a better back than like Pacheco and Stevenson
Maybe.
and
Boggs,
Pollard.
as a Packers
Go
fan,
ahead.
I was really surprised that Marshawn Lloyd was a 3rd-round pick for Green Bay. I don't think Packers fans saw that one coming. And that might be a warning to anyone thinking about over-investing in Jacobs.
I think you're right, but I think with Marshawn Lloyd's injury history in college, he's a firm 2, right?
Sure.
Jacobs is a guy that can be the dude to carry the full workload. We've seen him do it before, which is why I'm still fairly bullish on him, but I don't know. The plan this year gives me a little pause. I actually have him lower in redrafts than I do in Dynasty, because I think overall he is a very good back. But I think the plan this year is to use all these backs. So we'll see what it looks like moving forward here. The next guy on the list, Raheem Mostert, went from RB38 at 143.5 as his average draft position to RB28, 120s. So a big rise here. And to me, it's gotta be the fact that Jalen Wright is more of a project. And I think a lot of people are thinking that Jalen Wright is more built in the role of Devin Achane. Dude, I've got a Mostert as RB40. To me, his ECR is 42. So I feel like this is people getting desperate for a running back, seeing the production that Raheem Mostert had and reaching a little bit. I think that is mainly what it is. And I think, all of us psychos drafting in February are different to people drafting now. I think it gets a little, you get into more casual people drafting post NFL draft. So I think maybe that and his recent, big production season with all the touchdowns last year is why he's raising in ADP a little bit, but I'm not biting.
Yeah, how can anyone fail to get excited about this young go-getter at running back? It is curious to see this kind of a move up for an older back, a guy who's in his 30s, who's got a pretty extensive injury history, although he managed to stay healthy last year. I don't really have an explanation for it. I mean, like, it's fair to be optimistic about what he can do in that offense in 2024 because we saw what he did and what a prolific touchdown scorer he was last year. But yeah, I'm nowhere near RB28 with Raheem Mostert in my rankings, just because like he could turn into a cloud of dust in a heartbeat. Like, I mean, his
My guy's
career could be
32 years old.
yeah,
You
like
know,
one pulled hamstring, and it could pretty much be the end of his career. So
that's walking with a cane in running back years. To be 32,
pretty
is
much,
just
pretty
a bit
much.
much. And yeah, there's just so many guys. I mean, Samir White, Jerome Ford, Chase Brown, Blake Corum, Jalen Warren. These are all young backs, uh, well before 30 that I'm taking ahead of Raheem Mostert. Although, look, you know, Raheem Mostert is a guy that could produce a lot for you this year, but I think Wright eats up more Mostert touches than he does Achane touches because Achane wasn't getting a lot of touches anyway. So we'll see what happens with that Miami backfield. Zack Moss. Now this one is pretty obvious. He goes from RB 54 to RB 33, and that's because he signed with Cincinnati. And in Cincinnati, there's a path to him to be the main back. You and I are both big Chase Brown believers. We're not really buying in to Zack Moss as a lead back. His ECR is 40. I have him in the 60s on my running backs. I'm not even taking him as an RB5 in most spots here because this is a dude with an extensive injury history. The talent is there. Zack Moss is a good running back, Fitz, but I just don't think that he's going to be able to stay upright. And even if he is, I think Chase Brown is more talented. So for me, there's no way I'm buying this ascension for Zack Moss.
He had that great 5-week run at the beginning of 2023 where Jonathan Taylor was on IR and then Taylor comes off. And then the first week they kind of surprised us. Even with Taylor off IR, they gave Zack Moss most of the work Taylor's first week back. So he had the great 5-week stretch. From week 6 on, Boggs, Zack Moss averaged 3.6 yards per carry. He was back to being, oh, and by the way, let's not forget that it wasn't Zack Moss they initially had as the backup plan to Jonathan Taylor. Wasn't it Deion Jackson they wanted to throw out there first?
Actually, it was Evan Hull, and Evan Hull got hurt before
True.
the season started.
That's true.
So,
Yeah, so I
even
like
more reasoning.
he was the break glass in case of emergency guy. So I just yeah, I mean, like as far as long-term outlook, I'm skeptical. He's going to play a role, yes, but I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't turn out to be like the main early down back for the Bengals after all.
Yeah, it would absolutely not be surprising to me either here. Now, let's go to Puka Nacua, who is raising. It's not a ton, but with these small numbers, any move is significant. He went from wide receiver 8 to wide receiver 6. His ECR is 9. I have him at 12, but he went from a third round pick at 27.5 to 19.3. And look, I love Puka. I think Puka is an awesome wideout. But I don't know. I think he was probably safer in the third round. This is a dude that it's going to have now Cooper Kupp back for most of the season. Puka had a little bit of an injury history in college as well. He didn't get hurt much last year, only like at the very end of the season. So that was a big step up for him. But it's not just repeating his rookie season, it's repeating this season at all. 1,400 yards receiving was unbelievable. So even if he has 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, he's regressing. So it's tough to match this, but we've seen there's a lot of talent here. I don't really have a good reason for Puka to move up, specifically after the draft when, Neighbors and Harrison are going to be being drafted higher. So this one is genuinely a shock to me.
I agree. I don't understand this market shift from early third round to mid second round either, Boggs. Like what changed? Like maybe if Cooper Kupp had retired or something, I'd understand it, but that didn't happen. Like in seeing is believing with Puka. Like that rookie season was very legitimate, and he managed to stay healthy despite sort of a troublesome college injury history. So that's encouraging. I don't really have a beef with the 19.3 overall ADP. I just don't understand why it had been so low beforehand, I guess. So it does seem like kind of a weird move over a span of 3 months that there's this increased market confidence in Puka.
And I have him in a tier with like AJ Brown and Garrett Wilson and Tyreek Hill. I'm not like super low on him, and that tier goes to me from 7 to 12. So if you wanted to take him as high as 7, I totally understand. I'm just not taking above the top 4 and then the 2 rookies. I can't do. So 7 to me is the highest that Puka can go. So let's go to DeVonta Smith, moving from wide receiver 17 to wide receiver 13, which is actually a bigger shift than the 9 spots that he's moving in the overall to me. His ECR is wide receiver 16. This to me has to be because they just didn't add another big name wide receiver in the draft or free agency, right? So we're back to knowing for sure DeVonta Smith is the number 2 guy, which I kind of thought he was going to be anyway. I think with any wide receiver moving up, I'm going to be surprised because this class is so good and we start to see those rookies shift upwards. A lot of people drafting know the rookies, but some people don't. So when you're doing an initial draft, maybe they're not taking them as high as they should go in February before they have an actual team. So I think most of these receivers would move down because of the good class. And I like DeVonta Smith. I feel like I'm a giant DeVonta Smith fan, even though I'm much lower on ECR in my overall than he is here. So this one, again, leaves me scratching my head a little bit, Fitz.
Well, they paid him, Boggs. I think that's a big part of it, that they drove the Brinks truck up to his house. And I think maybe that does, I think there is something where that does have an impact on the market where people see that and they're like, oh, if the team loves him to this degree, maybe I should love him a little bit more too.
You know what? That's a really good explanation for it. To me, though, I don't know. AJ Brown is still really good. They added Saquon.
And
I don't know if this.
Hurts's efficiency as a passer nosedived without Shane Steichen as his mentor last year.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think I might have been a little happier if he hadn't signed that extension and maybe see if there are greener pastures elsewhere. So to me, it doesn't make sense, but I understand the logic, and you pointing out the contract thing makes a lot of sense as well. This one I'm not so surprised about. Drake London goes from wide receiver 20 to wide receiver 14. That's an 11 spot jump in overall as well, from 52 to 41. I'm still a little bit lower on him. There's just so many good wide receivers, and that there is a big chunk of wide receivers I like later in the drafts as well. So this is because, to me, you have now 2 great quarterback options, right? You have Cousins or Penix, who, as we talked about in the Fantasy Pro show earlier, the flagship football show earlier this week, there's no options. It's London, Pitts, and Bijan. So I don't have faith in Rondale Moore at all. I think Darnell Mooney could be a dude just because the quarterback play was so bad in Chicago, but this is because they didn't add anybody and they got good QB options and a new head coach coming over from LA, bringing in Zach Robinson, who's going to pass the ball way more than Arthur Smith did with his miserable run-only offense that I hate, that is now going to be my team's offense, but at least I'm not bitter about it. But Fitzy, is it just all these contributing factors adding up for London? Because I got to say, of the wide receivers raising, this is the least head-scratchy one.
Yep. And it's all those things, and the fact that Drake London is still really young. I don't have it in front of me. I think he's still just 22 because he came into the league pretty young. So, all that. He does not have the headwinds that he was dealing with the last couple of years, especially the quarterback thing, and also to a lesser extent, the play calling. We thought he was going to be such a target hog last year, Boggs, and it just didn't happen. Somehow, despite the fact that the second best receiver on that team was Matt Collins, Drake London was still not among the target leaders when you would have imagined that he would be.
I think that Michael Pittman and Drake London are very similar in play style and skill. And Michael Pittman outscored him by a lot of points last year, right? And it's because of the QB and the way the offense ran. So getting a new, the biggest thing in here is getting a new quarterback, but just as big is probably the fact that they have a new coaching staff. And I think we can cut and print what we just said about Drake London, because Kyle Pitts is a riser as well, only raising one spot overall in tight ends from 7 to 6, but from 74th pick to the 65th pick, raising 9 spots among tight ends is pretty strong. So it's just cut and print from what we said about London for Pitts, right?
It is the QB upgrade. We don't have a play caller who insists on giving half the tight end targets to Jonnu Smith when you've got Kyle Pitts there. And hopefully Pitts is going to stay healthy this year because he had that MCL sprain in 2022. Then we found out after the fact there was also, I can't remember if it was LCL or PCL damage, might have lingered into 2023, but now seemingly healthy, much improved quarterback situation, better play calling. Hopefully it's wheels up for Kyle Pitts.
And the last riser that we have is Dalton Kincaid, and this is just an easy picture to paint. It goes from tight end 8 to tight end 5, from 74.8 overall to 60.8 overall, raising 14 spots, a little more than a round. And this is because Keon Coleman was the only addition, and they traded Stephon Diggs. So you lose a target hog, you bring in a rookie to replace him, and now it looks like there's a bunch of targets available to be spread around, and Dalton Kincaid could be the main beneficiary.
Yeah, small sample size, but I believe over his last 2 regular season games, and if you'll recall, the Bills needed to win out to get into the playoffs, and their 2 playoff games, if you take those games, Kincaid had like 279 receiving yards or something like that, which works out to better than 1,000-yard pace. He really picked up the pace, and that was with Stephon Diggs around. Like, would not be a total shock if Kincaid led the Bills in targets this year.
Yeah, it really would not. So we will see. We're going to go over the followers, but before we do, I got to tell you guys about Reality Sports Online. And by now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated. It's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is a platform to test your mettle. If you're still not sure, you can test out your general manager skills for FREE free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use a promo code FANTASYPROS to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. That's promo code FANTASYPROS to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. All right, Fitzy, let's go to some followers. Let's go negative, like we're in a political campaign here. We'll start with Dak Prescott. He has gone from QB 10 to QB 13. I have him even lower than that in terms of dynasty. I have him at QB 15. To me, this is just the simple fact that we know specifically where some of these quarterbacks ended up. And we love McCarthy in Minnesota. We love Jane Daniels paired together with Cliff Kingsbury, and Caleb Williams is always going to be pretty high. So I think that's probably most of it, because for Dallas, they didn't add a running back. They're probably going to have to pass more. So just for this season, you would think that boosts his overall draft stock, but it has gone lower. And I think it's because of those landing spots for a couple of the QBs in the draft, if we're talking about February to May.
And this is going to be his 9th pro season, so he's not a spring chicken. But he is coming off a really efficient year as a passer, and it would not surprise anyone if Dallas had the passing volume really ramped up this year, because their running backs are Rico Dowdle and Dusty Zeke Elliott Boggs. So, like, they could be poised to throw a lot of passes. I fully expect that if Dak stays healthy, he's going to finish top 3 in pass attempts this year. So, I love the idea of having him for this year. But granted, as a guy who's now, I think he's turned 30, hasn't he? He's with 8 seasons under his belt. No, Dak.
Dak.
Dak's got to be exactly 30.
He's going to be 31 before the season starts.
Okay. So, yeah, older quarterback. I understand. I think the ADP now is right, but I still like him. Still a valuable asset.
Let's talk Justin Fields, because this is not a surprise at all. He goes from QB 12 as a QB 1 down to a QB3 at QB32, going from 18.3 overall to 121. And it's obviously because he goes from a starting quarterback in Chicago to now a bench quarterback in Pittsburgh, maybe to start the year. There's a possibility he could start. I'm much higher than his current ADP. I have him as QB22 still. So I think maybe the hate has gone just a little bit too far on Justin Fields, because we know what the upside is. We've seen the upside even in a bad offense. The upside is still insanely high. So for me, Fitz, I'm surprised he dropped this low, but it's not a shock at all that he fell. So your thoughts on Fields?
I think he's a flat out steal at this ADP. He's going to get another chance. And I think the only way he like crashes out of the league and doesn't hold a starting job like ever again long term is if he just can't shake the sack avoidance thing. Like that's the one area where Justin Fields is bad, that he takes way too many sacks. But that's his only major flaw. He's a great runner. Like I think he's got an NFL caliber arm. He's just got to clean up the sack avoidance, and hopefully he can get that coached out of him in Pittsburgh.
And we talked about Raheem Mostert rising in ADP. Kind of weird to see Achane falling from RB6 to RB9, 36.8 overall. So just on the fringe of being a third round pick, to firmly in the middle of the fourth round at 45.8. His ECR is still 8. 8 is where I had him before the draft and after the draft. I just didn't move him at all. And this is obviously because Jalen Wright comes in. Jalen Wright is also a speed back. But I've told you this before, Fitz. I think Jalen Wright is the solution to Raheem Mostert, not to Achane, because Achane is the best running back on this team with a bullet by a wide margin, whatever cliche you want to use. I think Achane is the best, but he's not built to take 20, 30 carries. He's built to touch the ball 15 times. And I think you always have to have a B back for that guy. I think that's what Wright is going to end up being, but it seems like the market thinks otherwise.
You said it perfectly, Boggs. Like, don't fade Achane because of Jalen Wright. The Dolphins just always want to have speed. Like, Mike McDaniel wants to be able to play a speedy running back at all times. And, like, you just can't give Achane 20 touches a game or play him 50 snaps a game. You just can't because of his size. So, as you said, like, they need a third back here. And, yeah, don't fade Achane. Like, I think the market is wrong to be lower on Achane now.
I think so too. A guy that I just don't understand the market value on, I guess, is Tyjae Spears. Now, he is a faller. He went from RB15 to RB25 and from 81.3 to 110.5 in ADP. His ECR is 26. I don't have him anywhere near that, Fitzy. I have him in the 40s. And I'm still a Tony Pollard believer. Obviously, that's why he has dropped a lot, is because the Titans signed Tony Pollard. But also, this is, if everything works out in Tennessee, this is going to be a pass first offense like we've seen from the Bengals. Brian Callahan moves here, coming over from being the OC in Cincinnati to be the head coach of the Titans. They added wide receivers. They signed Calvin Ridley. They signed Tyler Boyd. They still have Hopkins on this roster. Treylon Burks is basically a ghost. Will Levis has got a huge arm. This is the plan for Cincy moving forward, is to pass the ball more, run the ball less, and you bring in a guy like Tony Pollard. I think these are all contributing factors to why he fell. But to me, I'm putting him in with like some rookies like Ray Davis and Marshawn Lloyd and Kendre Miller and Tyler Algier. Like, I have him in that group of guys that we don't really know what their role is going to be this year, because I don't know what Spears' role is going to be under a new head coach with a running back in front of him. Is obviously with Derrick Henry there, the value boost up because Derrick Henry gets all the touches. I was a little surprised not to see him fall, but to see him fall and still be this high was surprising to me.
Tyjae Spears is really good and he's really fun to watch, but I think we have to be wary of him because of his knee condition, which is not unlike the knee condition I think that Jay Ajayi had, where like Ajayi maybe didn't have an ACL in one of his knees, and there was some issue with like the cartilage too. And we saw Ajayi have like one really good year, and then his career was over shortly thereafter. So it's hard to project Tyjae Spears for like a long, fruitful career, even though he's really talented, which is why I have a bit of a beef with the RB25 ranking. And RB15 back in February was just insane. Like people were taking him 81st overall. Like that was pretty foolhardy.
way.
And I think even 110, his revised ADP is a little too aggressive.
I'm right there with you. Let's talk Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is one of the hardest guys I feel like to rank. One of the hardest guys to rank coming into the season too, because here is this unbelievably good running back that had a major knee injury. And I thought for sure the Browns were cutting him, especially, they signed Deontay Foreman and Jerome Ford had a good year last year. They brought in Nyheim Hines as well. So it seemed like they were kind of angling towards maybe cutting Nick Chubb. He took a pay cut. He's still there. I know Stefanski loves him and all of that, but he did fall. He went from RB17 to RB35. So it was a massive drop here because of the injury, I guess, or because of the fact that he had to restructure maybe. I mean, obviously RB17 was too high. RB35, I have him higher than that. I've got him as RB28 because even though the injury is significant and is probably going to slow him down, what does it slow him down to? Does it slow him down to still a pretty good back, or does it slow him down to a secondary role? So I don't want him in my top 24. I don't want him as a top 2 running back, but taking a swing on him as my RB3, I love. So that's the range that I have him in, which is the range that he ended up in at RB35. I'm just a little more bullish on him. Maybe shouldn't have fallen this far. And his ECR is 33. So your thoughts on Nick Chubb, Fitzy?
Yeah, massive 3-round drop in ADP, which is weird considering that this is from February to May. Like, why are people so much more pessimistic now? I guess maybe not enough videos of him crushing it in drills have made the rounds on Twitter. I haven't seen any, so maybe that's it. The weird thing is, Boggs, over the same 3-month period, Jerome Ford's ADP has barely budged. You'd think that if Chubb had this big drop in ADP, there would be an accompanying ADP spike for Jerome Ford. And we haven't seen that at all. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess I'm kind of drafting around Chubb in a startup now. Like, because we just
That's
don't know.
fair.
It's a major injury. He already had one major knee injury at Georgia. It's just for an older, well, he's not that old, but I mean, for a back who's now really been through the ringer physically.
Yeah.
I worry.
A lot of miles on those wheels for Nick Chubb too. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Let's talk about some wide receivers. And I think in a vacuum, most wide receivers falling is because of this great rookie wide receiver class that we had coming in. We know where they're going, some good spots, some bad spots, but we know where they are, right? These names kind of surprised me that they were falling. The first one didn't. Nico Collins falling didn't surprise me at all. He went from wide receiver 12 to wide receiver 18. His ECR is even lower than that at wide receiver 20. And he dropped from 40.3 to 50.5. I've still got him at wide receiver 15. I still think he's a number 1, even though Diggs comes into town. They do get Tank Dell back, and they added Joe Mixon. So there's definitely more competition for touches for Nico Collins. And I completely understand that. But to me, he took such a giant step last year. And that was CJ Stroud's first year in the NFL. If we get more consistency, like I think we're going to, from CJ Stroud, and Nico Collins is that number 1 guy for him, I don't want to have him much lower than high end wide receiver 2. So I can't move him much lower, in my opinion, where I have him. Do you agree with this drop in his value, Fitzy, or are you with me where I just don't want to move him down too much yet?
I'm both. I mean, I understand the drop because of Stephon Diggs, but I do still love the player. I mean, Nico Collins is just he's a big bully, Boggs. And I mean that in the best possible way. Like he is just an absolute bully after the catch. Like, good luck to the cornerbacks who have to deal with him after he makes a catch and have to try to bring this guy to the ground, because he is just, I mean, he is like physically imposing. And I love that type of player, but I do get it. Like, this is going to create target pressure and probably caps his target ceiling, barring another injury to one of the other receivers at like what, 120. I can't see him getting much more than 120 targets with that many, competing with Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell for balls.
DK Metcalf is the next follower here, going from wide receiver 15 to wide receiver 20, about a 10 spot drop in the overall from 47 to 58. Personally, I have him at wide receiver 18, so I'm kind of splitting the difference, but my overall rank, even in a super flex, is closer to that first number of 47, Fitzy. So look, I understand that even I think they're going to run the ball more, right? Because Geno Smith is, probably declining. Sam Howell, I don't know if he was ready. So you have someone that may be too old, maybe that someone is maybe too young in terms of quarterbacks on this roster to make this a perfect scenario. But DK, speaking of bullies, he is absolutely one of them in the league. I think he is an alpha wide receiver, and I still really like him. So I was surprised to see him drop this significantly. But once again, a lot of wide receivers coming into this class. Roma Dunze, Malik, Marvin, obviously, are all ahead of him in every list. So what are your thoughts on DK dipping a little bit here?
Only 26. I don't really understand the reason for, why he would fall by almost a full round. I'm still buying, like, I've got DK in a couple of dynasty leagues, and like, to me, he's just a hold. Like, at the height of his powers, and like, if he has 1,100 yards, it's a disappointing season for him. Like, I'm still pretty bullish.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And the last, actually, no, we have way more wide receivers. They're all wide receivers than this. Jordan Addison went from wide receiver 19 to wide receiver 27. His ECR is 23. I have him at 22. I think that's right. But he dropped from 51.5 to 72.8. Again, Fitz, lots of wide receivers coming in here. And that's probably why he dropped. But I'm taking Addison still over even. I love Worthy. I'm taking him over Worthy. I'm taking him over Coleman and McConkey and Brian Thomas because I know he is in a pass-heavy system, even though Justin Jefferson is there and they extended him and, all seems right there. This is a Kevin O'Connell offense that is going to pass the ball a bunch of times. And this year, TJ Hawkinson's going to miss a big chunk of the season. So I was kind of surprised to see him on the fallers list as well, mainly because he's a young asset in a dynasty league. So this one really did surprise me in terms of fallers.
I understand that people are nervous because with Justin Jefferson there, the target count for Jordan Addison isn't going to be massive as long as Jefferson's healthy. And we don't know what the quarterback play is going to look like for the Vikings with JJ McCarthy. There's optimism, but we don't know if he's going to be even a league average quarterback. But man, I think I'm still buying on Addison at this price. Like, if I can get him in the 7th round of a startup or 6th round, yeah, he's borderline 6-7 right now. For a guy with his talent, yes, I'm buying.
Deebo also here. Going from this one is not a surprise at all. There was a bunch of stuff with Deebo, a bunch of trade rumors, but he goes from wide receiver 22 to 32. That's 10 spots. He drops 17 spots, 17 and a half spots, if we're being correct here, in ADP as well, from 59.3 to 76.8. I have him closer to this low number because all the stuff I just said about Jordan Addison and who I'm taking him over, I put Deebo below those guys, below young assets like Worthy, Coleman, McConkey, Brian Thomas. And I think there's a glut of the old guys as well. Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans. I'm taking all of those guys ahead of him. So Deebo dropping here is the one to me that makes the most sense. But he still is a very good asset. Are you surprised to see this slip from him? Because I'm really not on this one.
No, and he's not a younger wide receiver, so I'm not surprised that he would start to fade a little bit. Plus, there have been these trade rumors around both Ayuk and Deebo, and you wonder if it were Deebo who was the one moved, Boggs. Like, I don't know, he's not a conventional wide receiver, and it feels like Kyle Shanahan has really utilized his talents well. Would he be as valuable elsewhere? But then again, if it were Ayuk on the move, that would certainly seem to be a good thing for Deebo, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't quite know how to play this. I like you have him ranked around where his ADP has fallen to.
Yeah.
So I think it's about right. And maybe the market was just a little too optimistic on Deebo in February.
And the last faller we'll talk about before getting into some deep stashes here, Christian Watson fell from wide receiver 36 to wide receiver 45, from 88.3 to 108. His ECR is on that lower end of 43, but I'm closer to his higher end ECR at 38 Fits. And I know that you are a bit of a Watson stan, even with the hamstring injuries and all of that. But it's easy to understand. We've talked about it ad nauseum here. The incoming class has pushed him back. Did it push him back too far here? Because I feel like it did.
It did. And I'm very optimistic. He saw a specialist about the hamstring. So hopefully with adjustments to his training regimen, that's going to be sorted. And Boggs, when he played with Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed last year, when the three of them were together, Watson had the greatest target share of those guys by a pretty wide margin. I think it was over 25%, over 26%. So, I still think he's going to be the lead receiver in Green Bay. He's huge. He's 6'4". He's got sub 4.4 speed. He scored 8 touchdowns over a 4-game stretch as a rookie, and 4 touchdowns over a 3-game stretch last year. This guy's really good and really explosive. Man, if you can get him at wide receiver 45, 108 overall, I love that value on him.
It's a very, very good value. I'm right there with you. Still a good asset. And there is just no way, with so much inexperience coming into the NFL, that we've seen this guy hit his peak yet. So I think there's still, meat on the bone for him to go ahead and grow. Before I get to the deep stashes here, let me remind you guys about the Dynasty Draft Kit over at Fantasy Pros. Whether you're starting fresh or getting ready for your rookie draft, dive deep into Dynasty Prep with our 2024 Dynasty Draft Kit at fantasypros.com/dynasty. You can get access to our expert rankings, rookie draft advice, mock drafts, and much, much more. You can also join live experts like Fitz and I every single Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. We are on the Fantasy Pros Discord answering Dynasty questions for everybody. That is accessible in the Dynasty Draft Kit as well. So check that out over at our Discord and dominate your Dynasty League with our Dynasty Draft Kit at fantasypros.com/dynasty. All right, Fitzy, we'll go quick on this. Some deep stashes that you have. I'm going to put out some examples. You can tell me if you like them or not in terms of deep stashes. At the quarterback position, I really don't think there are any deep stashes. If you wanted to consider maybe some flame out first round picks, right? Maybe Sam Howell is the best example because the Seahawks really like him. In terms of a deep stash, a guy that's not projected to play much this year at all, and going to play in the future. But I don't know. Would you consider Trey Lance a deep stash or Spencer
Yes.
Rattler? That's probably the best options. And you're getting nothing from those guys this year at all. So, I think with the other positions, you might see at least a little production on the back end of the season, or if an injury happens. With these guys, you are waiting for injuries. So quarterback deep stash is a little tougher to me, Fitzy.
I would rather have another Sam Darnold than Sam Howell. And the fact that teams keep showing interest in Sam Darnold, the fact that the Vikings kind of went out and anointed him as their bridge quarterback. They knew they were going to draft someone, but they also figured if they had to start a veteran and, for a month or so while the rookie learns the ropes a little bit, Sam Darnold was going to be okay and that he'd be a good backup. We saw something similar with the Panthers when they brought him in. So teams are still willing to give Sam Darnold a chance. I'd rather have Trey Lance than Sam Howell. Trey Lance has never really failed on the field, in games.
Never really gotten a fair shake. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe the failure is that he was never able to beat out Brock Purdy and that he was never able to win over Kyle Shanahan. So, and it's possible, that he just does eventually get a chance somewhere and stinks. but like Trey Lance does have that running ability that's always going to be attractive. We have seen Sam Howell go out onto the field and just stink out loud. I mean, what a weird year he had last year. Like at one point, he was leading the league in like pass attempts and completions and was in the top 10 in fantasy. But by the end of the season, Boggs, he was struggling to complete half of his throws in
He
these
was beat
games.
up.
Oh,
He was beat to crap. I mean, he took so many sacks. He got hit so many times, and the defense didn't hold anything up. It was an unwinnable situation for Sam Howell, which is why I'm still in on him a little bit. But the dude has to learn to get rid of that football, not take the hit,
right,
or he's not going to last. So,
like
and
Justin Fields,
you know, Fitz, I love the guys that you brought up.
Sack avoidance.
Yes, yes. And I love the guys that you brought up here specifically because it all goes to if a quarterback is a former first round pick that didn't work, he will get multiple shots, especially an early first round pick. But that guy will get multiple shots and he will hold value. Carson Wentz is still a backup quarterback in the NFL. And, he's still holding value in leagues. That's why, guys like the guys that you mentioned, Trey Lance, even down to like Kenny Pickett is still getting a chance, right? Like these guys hold value in leagues. Sam Darnold has gotten many shots. So first round picks hold value in super flex leagues as well. Let's go to running backs. I picked 4 here. A couple of these guys we've talked about recently. Vidal, I know, is one of your absolute favorites. Fitzy. Tank Bigsby, he flamed out last year, but they're talking about getting him more touches. They didn't add anybody else, so it's him and Dearness Johnson competing for that spot. We mentioned earlier with Zack Moss that Evan Hull was supposed to be the guy, right? And Evan Hull is back coming off of his knee injury and could be the immediate backup to Jonathan Taylor this season. And another guy I like at running back is Dylan Laube, the running back in Vegas, because I think Zack Moss is the guy there, but we don't know. We haven't seen Zamir White. I don't know why I said Zack Moss, but yeah, we think Zamir White is the guy there, but Dylan Laube could have a shot to be Austin Eckler-ish in this offense. So those are the running backs that I picked. Do you like those guys? And is there anyone you would add to that group?
No, that's a good group. Kimani Vidal could be the lead running back, but he's a 6th round pick, so he could be cut. I mean, I don't think he's going to be cut. I think he's actually pretty good. University of Troy's all-time leading rusher, and just like this little bowling ball, Boggs, and like faster than we thought. Like he ran a better 40 time. I expected him to be like 4.6 and he was 4.48, I think. So like him, good setup with only Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins ahead of him on the depth chart. Laube, I agree. I mean, we know Zamir White's not really a prolific pass catcher, so Laube could instantly come in and be the 3rd down back. I know some people think it's going to be Amir Abdullah, but like Amir Abdullah hasn't been good at that role. Like he's a special teams guy. Yeah. So Bigsby, I don't know what to make. Like I almost feel like in case the way Doug Peterson seems hell-bent on getting that guy involved in the offense, I feel like I should go out and get at least, Tank Bigsby in at least one league. But, he hasn't shown us anything yet. And, I'm sorry, who was the other one, Boggs? I do like whoever.
Evan Hull.
Evan Hull. Yes, I do actually have Evan Hull on 1 or 2 dynasty teams. And look, Jonathan Taylor's not going to be playing on passing downs. He didn't even play on passing downs at Wisconsin, where they worked that guy into the ground. It was Daria Gumbawale as the passing down back at Wisconsin. So Evan Hull is probably the favorite to be the primary passing down back for the Colts. Definitely worth a stash if you have rosters of 28 players or more. I think it's worth having him around.
For the wide receivers here, the 4 that I picked, and these guys all have an ECR below 60. So they're below your wide receiver 5 in a 12-man league. Troy Franklin was 61, so I put him on this list. Your boy Dontayvion Wicks is on here, coming in at ECR wide receiver 65. I love Javon Baker. He's at 68. And then all the way down at 82, a real deep stash. I put Jalen Hyatt in here because he just did not have any good quarterback play last season at all, and he didn't have anybody to work off of. Now he has Malik Neighbors. So I'm in on Hyatt. And look, we're talking about dart throws at if you're in a standard, even a standard dynasty, these guys are flyers pretty late. So out of that group, Franklin, Wicks, Baker, Hyatt, not the deepest of stashes with the first three. Hyatt's pretty deep, but who do you like out of that group if you're picking one to throw a dart on between Franklin, Wicks, and Baker?
Well, both of the rookies are intriguing for sure, Boggs. But well, let me ask you this, Boggs. Do you think Davante Adams is good at football?
Yeah, I think he's pretty good at football. Yeah.
Okay, because Matt LaFleur compares Dontayvion Wicks to Davante Adams, and that seems like pretty high praise to me. He has made that comparison.
Could be. You don't think that maybe that's a touch hyperbolic, just a little bit?
It might be, but like that, the fact that Wicks' playing style makes LaFleur think of Davante Adams, like that's no small thing. And like he was really actually pretty good last year. So even though it's a crowded wide receiver picture in Green Bay, that's talent I think worth betting on, even if it's going to be hard to find ways to start him this year, but maybe that eventually clears up over time. That's kind of my issue with Hyatt. I don't know when I'm ever going to start him. In a best ball dynasty, I like him a lot because he's probably going to give you some splash plays and some big games here and there, but it's going to be really hard to see him coming.
There's a reason why he's in the 80s, right? So
yeah.
Not a surprise at all there. And then I picked two tight ends that are post tight end 24. The tight end is so deep. You don't really need to stash, but if you have the extra roster spots, I put Jelani Woods here, who's at ECR 29. He is coming off a major injury, but he's a big target that caught a lot of footballs in college, and I think that he could be pretty solid for the Colts, who didn't end up getting Brock Bowers, right, which was a big thing there. And then Luke Schoonmaker for the Cowboys is way down at ECR tight end number 39. I just think that there's a chance for him to develop into something. So both those tight ends are kind of late. There's a bunch to pick from. Do you like those guys? And is there another one that maybe you like, Fitzy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the ceiling is for Schoonmaker. He's one of those guys who I think is real borderline rosterable in dynasty leagues for the most part. Boy, Jelani Woods just has physical tools to dream on. Big, fast, long arms. I mean, I'm intrigued for sure. I was kind of in on him last year and obviously disappointed. Didn't get a shot. Worth holding, I think. Worth stashing, yes.
And there's a bunch of tight ends down here. I mean, Eric All, Cade Stover, Noah Gray, Kylan Granson, Brevin Jordan. There's so many good deep stash tight ends. It's not something that you really need to do. These are the guys that I said maybe if you did have a spot. But that's it. That is everything that we have for you today here on the Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast on Fantasy Pros. Remember to follow us on the Twitter at Bogman Sports for myself, at Fitz_FF on the Twitter machine. And we will see you guys next week. Take it easy, everybody.